Welcome back to Broxham, everybody, and today we're going to be doing a quick video looking at the Will of Asuryan. So this was recently brought up to me by one of my subscribers. They basically asked me if it was possible to make a good or successful Eldar list without using Will of Asuryan. So the question we're going to answer in this video is, can Craftworld Eldar lists work without it? Because it's such a pivotal psychic power that we use to grab objective control, which is a little bit difficult with Eldar. Eldar have a little bit of trouble getting objectives, which is why this power is so useful in so many different situations. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in and see if Will of Asuryan can be cut. So a quick overview of the video, we're going to be looking at Will of Asuryan and what it does. We're going to be seeing Will of Asuryan's use in competitive play and why it's good. And lastly, we're going to be looking at and asking, can a Craftworld Eldar list be effective without taking Will of Asuryan? So Will of Asuryan basically gives a unit objective secured. It also provides fearless to the unit so that they don't have to take morale checks. And lastly, the unit can still shoot and perform actions just like Dire Avengers could. So that's pretty useful. All of those abilities are pretty good for holding objectives, scoring on secondary objectives, and also being able to still do damage. And maybe more importantly, it's able to allow a unit to steal objectives away from other non-objective secured units. So what is Will of Asuryan's use in competitive play and why is it good? So this is used in most competitive lists to give Craftworld Eldar units and characters objectives secured, which currently we lack a lot of because our troops aren't really the best at holding objectives, and we don't have any custom Craftworld traits that give any of our units objectives secured. So Will of Asuryan being able to, use it on a Farseer in the late game to give them objective secured and being able to steal an objective, or give it to a Warlock or another type of unit, is very important, and it's always a good thing to have in your back pocket. Also, it lets units still shoot while performing actions, which is great for scoring secondary objectives. For example, if you have a large unit that, needs to score on a secondary objective, but you still want it to be able to shoot, Will of Asuryan is perfect for that. So if it's a non-Dire Avenger unit, let's say it's a unit of Warp Spiders or something like that, you're in the enemy backlines, it's late in the game, you have no other units to perform Scout the Enemy with, and you still want to be able to shoot the Warp Spiders, Will of Asuryan could be a good power in this instance. Now, of course, this kind of works on pretty much every unit. It doesn't have to be Warp Spiders. As long as the unit is a core unit or a Azuryani character, then you should be fine. So, the real question to address the main point of this video: can a Craftworld Eldar list be effective without taking Will of Asuryan? Well, the short answer, of course, is yes, it can be effective. But it gives you one less tool to work with that could honestly mean the difference between winning and losing a game. And in my games, personally, it's made a vast difference in countless games, being able to steal an objective away from an enemy. So the real debate here isn't whether or not Will of Asuryan is a good power, because I think we can all agree that it's one of the best psychic powers for objectives, not only in our codex, but probably in the entire game. And the real question is, what type of Craftworld list would not want to take Will of Asuryan? In what type of Craftworld list would Will of Asuryan actually be a downside and not a benefit? So I did a little bit of thinking, and Alpha Strike lists came to me as the type of list that Will of Asuryan would not perform well in. So the reason for this is because Alpha Strike lists don't really care much about objective control, especially later in the game, as much of your enemy forces are going to be decimated if the Alpha Strike is pulled off successfully. And typically there are not as many Farseers in these types of lists, and the ones that are focused primarily on damage dealing powers and buffs, as well as, buffing themselves. So I know that in lists like, for example, my Webway Warriors and Mobile Fighters list, and the Farseers in that list, honestly, are purely offensive. You have one with Guide and Doom, and the other one that I have has the Kernus Bow Executioner, and Mind War. So they're fully front-loaded with damage, and that's on purpose because you want to be able to deal as much damage as possible to enemy units so that they can't retaliate against you. And within the first couple turns, again, units are not going to be really too concerned with action-based secondary objectives. Typically, you're going to be going for more passive-based ones, like things like Line Breaker and stuff like that, that are going to be scored anyway when you're performing your Alpha Strike. So Alpha Strike lists are primarily designed to destroy the enemy so much within the first couple turns of the game that they have little chance of doing anything back. And because of that, Will of Asuryan's place in those lists is rather limited. Now, I'm not saying it can't be used effectively still. Again, Will of Asuryan is a good power regardless. But in these types of lists, typically, what Will of Asuryan gives you as far as a psychic power is not going to be as needed when trying to fulfill the list's primary objective, which is, of course, destroy as many enemies as possible, leave your opponent crippled and unable to really do anything in the battle. And then at that point, it really doesn't matter if your units have objective secured or not, because you're going to have the run of the table, and the enemy is not going to really be able to do anything against you. So, in conclusion, Will of Asuryan, of course, is a fantastic psychic power and needed in most Craftworld Eldar lists. However, in Alpha Strike lists, I think Will of Asuryan is really not desired, basically because of the list's inherent goal of needing to do as much damage as possible in the shortest time possible, and Will of Asuryan just doesn't help the list with that goal. So I think in those types of lists, Will of Asuryan is not needed. But if you're running any type of balanced Eldar list, or you're running a more defensive style Eldar list, I think Will of Asuryan is absolutely key. I always take it in my Uthway list. I think it's a great psychic power, and again, it saved me on many occasions. Being able to steal an objective away from a unit of Assault Marines, for example, that are not troops, that don't have objectives secured, is very helpful. And, you never know what you're going to go up against. And if your opponent doesn't have objective secured on his unit, Will of Asuryan can absolutely ruin their plans of being able to control the board. And again, you could steal something away from an opponent with a Warlock. And I've done this a couple times where I've cast Will of Asuryan on a Warlock Skyrunner, run the Warlock Skyrunner up to the objective, capture that objective, and then force my opponent to react, or honestly, just deny my opponent victory points. Either way, it's a great thing to do, and one of, in my opinion, the funniest things to do, especially when your opponent has a massive unit on an objective, and you could just sneak your Warlock in there real quick and steal it away from them. Nothing is more satisfying. So to end the video, a quick shout out to that subscriber who mentioned Will of Asuryan and asked me if Will of Asuryan is a mandatory psychic power for all Eldar lists. And of course, my answer to that is it's a very good psychic power. It's fantastic. But there are lists that do not need it. And if you're focusing more on an Alpha Strike or damage dealing type of style where you're just trying to do as much damage as possible to enemy units, and that's your goal, then Will of Asuryan is probably not the best power to have in that kind of list. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. Peace out, everybody. See you guys later. More content to come. I'm doing a video on Wraith Knights and their viability in Arcs of Omen coming up, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, that's it. If you guys have any suggestions for future videos, I have a huge list of videos I still need to do. Need to do one covering AdMech, which I'll probably wait for until after Arcs of Omen. I have another video that I want to cover on how to deal with Tau and stuff like that. So there's a couple of videos that are coming up in the near future. If you guys have any suggestions, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your ideas about, what I should cover next. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today. I'll see you guys later, and have a good one. Peace out.